Welcome back, everybody, to the Sexy Business Podcast. This time, we are going to be talking about a special, specific visual novel that we've both played. This is Lewd Neko. I am Spooky Dangerous. You're in the Sexy Business, and we want to talk about My Pig Princess.
I'm so excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, for sure, because we get to delve more into the furry realm, which I know you are excited about. I've followed CyanCapsule for a long time, since before the game existed, and from memory, Cyan just had Emily, the main character, just as like their OC for a very, very long time, and it feels like creating the visual novel was Cyan's monetization of that character, and like kind of just as an artist rather than just selling pin-up or selling art and stuff like that. And so now we've got the game, and then if we look at the regular Patreon updates, it will have updates to the game and stuff like that. So we both got a chance to play the game. Neko's only played the public release one, but I had, before our discussion of this, had bought the Patreon version because I am down bad. And that was part of the reason why I thought we should suggest it. I think it is a good example of a game that we should talk about. And actually, do you want to kick us off with some of your first impressions?
So I think definitely the thing that's most unique or striking about this visual novel is the art style. Like, oh my gosh, while I was playing it, I just kept saying this is so pretty. It has this almost like fairy tale vibe to me, which works for the setting, this sort of fantasy setting with talking animals, of course, and princesses and kingdoms. And it almost gives like a storybook or like a painterly vibe almost. It's just how like soft the colors are and all of the detail and like these like really beautiful detailed backgrounds that I was just like focusing on the whole time. There's like this, sexy pig on screen. I'm like, wow, look at those trees.
Yeah, look at this gorgeous courtyard and the stone and yeah. Well, in the very, very first scene where the main character is introduced, you're on your farm, and there's just like a really gorgeous illustrated background of kind of the region that you just is never seen again.
Yeah. But like having that extra detail, it sets the scene so well. Or like even the fact you get like some mini illustrations here and there. And I remember like when it starts up, you're a farmer and it shows like some of the vegetables you've been growing. And like there's no reason why it had to show the vegetables you were growing, but they looked pretty and I enjoyed being like, wow, those are some well painted eggplants.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I think about a lot is some attention to detail like that is really immersive in the experience. You're not having a moment where you're like, oh, I'm playing a video game, or this asset isn't rendered, or this is an artistic choice that they made. You're just experiencing the thing exactly as the story requires. And I mean, you could just write it so that those things aren't there or aren't talked about or don't happen. But being able to have little detail moments like that helps connect you to the touchstone that is the setting, which I think is important.
And I mean, I guess the other thing that's really striking is the character design, because I think especially with furry art, it's really interesting seeing how different furry artists choose to draw various animals and like where they go with like how furry do they want this to be and like, what aspects of the animal are they going to sort of emphasize. I was actually scrolling through like the comments on like the Itch.io because I'm always interested in seeing like what other people think. And there's like a couple of comments where people were like, I'm not ever into furry, but this guy's got a really good art style, or he draws furries in a way that I really enjoy. And I think especially, I feel like even amongst the furry fandom, pigs aren't usually drawn that much, or a lot of people don't really have pig characters. I think because they're still seen as like kind of gross, like in our society. Like pigs are like, oh, they're dirty and they're fat and smelly and all that stuff.
Well, it's also not a hairy animal. Like a lot of the actual like core furry stuff is like your really fluffy and cuddly animals. Whereas a pig, I feel like, doesn't really fit into that kind of category. But I feel like in this case, Emily's design is really interesting to me because she very much passes for human. The main differences would be the tail, which you don't really see that much. The ears, which are, let's say, top-loaded, and the feet, which you couldn't see if they were in shoes, for example. So with the beanie, she could pass for human because her facial features aren't ridiculously pig-like. Like her nose is upturned, but there's humans with an upturned nose, right? And her features and her shapes are incredibly cutesy, and I think that's intended, which I think is not necessarily attributes that we would normally assign to a pig. But I think the character design is very, very well done. There's a whole bunch of other characters that we do get to see. Actually, I think now is a good time to bring up the difference between the public version and the Patreon version, because there is a scene later on that introduces a whole bunch of other different furry characters. There is a bikini contest at the beach. And from memory, it includes a hippopotamus, a zebra, a giraffe, and then Emily can also go up and attend. But I think it's 4 in total, including Emily.
There's also the scene if you peek inside the bathroom.
Yes, with the deer.
Where there's like it's a deer. And was the other one a horse or was it just a buck, like with the big antler? No, it was a moose. That was it.
I think it's a moose. Yeah. Yeah.
You get to see like the
you
male.
Do get a range
variants.
Yeah, you do get a nice range of animals that do kind of exist in this area, because we have the other. I wouldn't say major character, but she is in a few things. Victoria, the chicken. Whereas Victoria's got a beak. Does not really have visible ears from what I'm looking at. And kind of has the like taloned hands, feet kind of a thing. So I think it is still very human, but like maybe 10% animal in general. I think that makes
since, a lot of them have hairstyles.
Yes.
Which you see a lot in like the more kimono, like Japanese style of furry. A lot of times they have hair, or they design the fur to look like a hairstyle. But I think most of the characters here have some sort of hair. Like even the chicken, they make her comb sort of look like she has like the half-shaved head look almost. It reminds me a little bit of like the Beastars art style. Not like that they're similar art styles, but that the way they do furry is a little similar. Where like Beastars, I think also has like some of the more like overall human proportions. A lot of them have human hands from what I remember.
Yeah.
Which like with the chicken here, like she's got the sort of talon design on her arms, but she still has relatively like normal hands. Or the same thing with the pigs. They still have normal hands even though they have hooved feet. Which I think BoJack Horseman does the same thing too, where like all the characters still have like hands, which is something where like I think the more traditional furry, they typically more embrace like giving them paws or claws or talons or
or like an improved padded paw where they do actually have human dexterity, which I also think is pretty common. I think it is interesting to see. There's like a slider shortly with like a full animal and then like a woman with ears, where somewhere along the line you have to pick and choose where you want your characters to be.
I would say this one's almost like sort of smack dab in the middle.
Yeah. I think it would be a little bit to the left of center, but I guess it depends on the character. I feel like Emily herself is left of center, but characters like Victoria is definitely more center.
Yeah. Or like some of the male characters are more like on the very left side, but I think that's pretty common for like game design in general. Like, there's the kind of joke about how like in every like fantasy series, all the the male variants are super fucking monstrous and scary, and then the girl ones are just like sexy lady with ears or horns.
Yeah, this definitely does have that kind of feeling. I did want to go through into kind of a little bit of a plot summary, so that you could get a vibe for what you had missed not playing the Patreon version. Because with the version that I played, there's 9 different scenes in the gallery, which is just how I think the whole thing is split up. But the scenes in the gallery are just like the sex scenes. There's other scenes that happen in between them that are not super related, which I'll get to in a second. But you said you got the first 5, which is the oily massage, the bath fun, moose and deer, park deep throat, and Victoria's breast lesson. And so, as I understand it, that's kind of the end of the free version. After that, we have a scene where the main character gives Emily an art class, and it's kind of like it's not in her bedroom, like the room that you see in the background that we're recording in front of. It's in like a different, more
Yeah.
princessy room. It's got like the big
tower,
round
right?
bed. Yeah. And there's like 10 seconds of art lesson, and then the rest is sex in multiple different positions. And then you have a bunch of different options with how you want to do that. After that is then Maple's measuring, where you go and get fitted for a swimsuit from the dog character Maple, and she takes your measurements very efficiently, effectively, with great enthusiasm. And then
Is
after
Maple
that,
the bimbo dog?
yeah.
Okay, I think I've seen her in some of their other art.
Okay. And then after that is the bikini contest and cannibal slash, which is the name of the gallery item. In the bikini contest, like I mentioned before, we get to meet a whole bunch of other different characters, and then you get to give your opinion on which one you think is the best at the bikini contest. And then there's just like some generic beach shenanigans. And then there's a scene after this one, which is not listed in the gallery because it's not a sex scene, but there's like an arena and a fight, and you are brought on as a medic, and there's a mini game where you have to clean and patch a wound that one of the warriors receives. Which I was really interested to get your take on that, because it's like incredibly graphic. Like you have to like swab it, you have to plaster it, maybe stitch it depending on what it is, right? And it's incredibly specific and detailed, and completely clashes with the tone of everything else. And it's to like one of the random male warriors that you've never talked to or really encountered before, which I thought was really an interesting choice if that's going to lead to something specific later. Or Cyan was just like, oh, this is a story that needs to be told or something. And then after that is the last one, which is kind of like a threesome scene with Victoria and Emily in like a picnicky date type thing.
Nice.
But yeah, so there is a big disparity between the Patreon version and the free version. I'm not sure if the free version gets regular updates. When I first saw the free version, it was 0.1. And then I got the Patreon one at 3 or 4 or something. And then I came back later for version 6, which is this one that I'm reading from right now.
I mean, the free version just updated like 2 months ago, and the last update was January 2023. So it's been like over a year.
Interesting.
But I did see in the recent comments, because a lot of people were like, hey, are you ever going to put this just on Steam or something like that so people can just buy it early access? They said they're considering that after version 0.4 goes public.
That makes sense.
So I would guess in maybe a year and a half, they'll be doing an early access on Steam. Possibly.
Yeah, because you want enough content. Steam does this thing where if your game is under 2 hours, people can refund it for free. Yeah. And you want to have enough content in your game where people can kind of get to that mark. And especially in early access, it's a bit more lenient. But if you can get like close and then people are still excited for what the next thing is, then you should be fine. But that's kind of a good goal and a good ballpark to be looking towards. But yeah, so that's kind of our plot summary. That's kind of what's been going on with what we know of the development so far. I wanted to give some first impressions. I did throw it over to you to walk through some of it as well. But for me, it's interesting because I get to play this on 2 hands. On the first hand, I am looking at this as like a competitor, as a fellow dev, and how I can emulate the same thing. And it's really hard because the game itself is very impressive visually. It's very clearly all been illustrated by one person, doing all of the backgrounds and doing all of the character art and stuff like that. And I don't know if you can tell, but you can see from Cyan's presence on stuff like Twitter is that nothing else is being worked on. This is kind of the main thing, and this is going to be super exhausting. And this is kind of what Cubesy was suffering with, because she was doing everything for Shackles of Elswyn. She was doing all of the backgrounds. She was doing all the character work. And every month, uh, Patreon kind of demands you to have done something or people leave. And so it's like, okay, we want to do kind of as much of a whole scene as we can do, which means this much stuff needs to get done, which doesn't super work great when there's so much that's required to fill out a scene. And you can see Cyan's update schedule is like this month, maybe you'll see a teaser of 2 or 3 pieces of art, and it's not an actual game update every month. Like they wait until a whole scene is completed and then upload it, and people are, I guess, patient enough to wait for the 2 or 3 months, which is hard, right? I would love to see the graph of leavers and rejoiners and stuff like that, because cycling is really common for people to like pop out and come back, kind of like what I did. But then on the other hand, I have my dick. I just get to play the game and enjoy it as a viewer, which is fun. I think it's really high quality stuff. I'm not I'm not a person that looks for furry content specifically. I just enjoy high quality art style, and there's a lot of furry content that does have high quality art style, and this is definitely one of them. And so it's good for me to go and enjoy it and get as immersed as possible into the story and have those exciting moments of, oh, I get to meet this character. Oh, something exciting is happening with them. Oh my god, she actually liked me back. Oh, I'm shocked. I'm just a lowly farmer from the outskirts. You didn't know who I was until today. And classic rom-com trope kind of stuff. And then in playing it, I got really taken out by this random fight scene thing. Because it's like it really stops the game for a moment and asks you to look at this thing. It does give you like a warning about what's coming ahead, and you can skip it from memory. But obviously I'm like, well, I have to see what this is. I have to know what's going on. And so it's really weird. Like a lot of the stuff in FDW, for example, where they're like, you could skip this. You know that there's someone that's like, I'm here for just exactly this one thing. But I'm trying to figure out who came to My Pig Princess to see the giant warrior pig dude get his wounds patched up. So I would love to get some insight as to what that's for. Like if it's for something coming later, like this character can be more important later, or you doing that proves something to Emily, like in the story, like it defines you as a character, or something
I would
like
have
that.
2 guesses. My first guess would be that the mini game's gonna come back later, and like maybe a more vital character's been hurt, and it's meant this is like the practice round of like, hey, get used to this mechanic that's gonna come back at maybe a later moment where like I don't know, maybe like your friend, the little knight, the cute little knight guy, gets like hurt, or like the captain of the guards, the uncle who's like all up your ass all the time, and maybe you have to save them or something, and that'll like make them finally like
Win them
you. That would be
over.
like my first guess. My second one would be I've noticed sometimes with Western visual novels, they feel morally obligated to have a mini game in there somewhere so they can be like, hey,
This
don't
is
call
a
my visual novel
game.
not a game.
Yeah.
Because, it's a really common negative Steam review on so many visual novels that are like, I really like the story, but I'm giving a thumbs down because it's not technically a game. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's a visual novel. It's like there's so many visual novels that don't have choices or don't have little gameplay sections. Read the fucking description.
Yeah.
Anyways, I've noticed that sometimes, because sometimes mini games in general to me take me out of most visual novels. Like most of the time they just feel out of place. I'm like, why am I doing this? It doesn't actually matter because it's so easy to save and reload in a visual novel.
Well, it depends, right? Like, there's the DDR one in FTW, which I hate. There's a few other ones, which is like click these things really fast, which I think are fine. But anything that requires me to use both of my hands should not go in the game. I think that shouldn't be such a hard like rule to have, right? I don't think it should be that difficult to figure out that perhaps this should be just mouse or just keyboard. But
like,
it gets
I liked
like
the because you can also get that quiz early on, which I kind of like. It's not a mini game, but it felt like a mini game kind of, where they're like, okay, you get 10 questions that kind of test you on like, have you been paying attention to the game's story so far?
the
And, like,
classic
what things
visual
look
novel
like.
formula.
Yeah, and it's a pretty easy quiz, but it was like fun, and I enjoyed like actually being like, oh, do I actually remember all this stuff? I enjoyed that. I thought like that was fun because it's not super disruptive. Like it's pretty quick and easy,
Mm.
and
I
it's
also think
kind of
there's a
like
rock
fun.
paper scissors mini game as well at some point, which is kind of interesting because it must just be randomly selected in some way.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I think there might be some way to do that because I remember I played other visual novels that had like a rock paper scissors type game before. Um, so I guess that's something you can probably, code in.
Mm.
Part of me, I mean, maybe it's like with the mini games. I don't know. Like maybe they just wanted to see what they could code into this game, like for fun. Like it could have just been like, because like one of the things he mentions is that like the struggle of being the solo artist and
Mm.
writer for this visual novel is that it's the only thing you can fucking work on for the rest of your life until it's done, right? And that can
Yeah.
be frustrating for any artist because even no matter how much you love your characters or the world you've built, sometimes just it's like eating pizza every day. Pizza's great, but if you eat every day, eventually you get sick of it. So like I don't know, maybe they just wanted to try their hand at like, okay, I'm gonna put in this like really graphic art of this pig getting injured, and now you have to fix him.
Yeah, and if the fans go crazy for it, I'll do more. Otherwise, I've learned something. Like, I've built a lot of stuff in Rampage just as professional development.
Mm,
Cufflinks and Cages is a great example because all the other games that we make are linear. Eventually, you will get to an end. Cufflinks and Cages does not have an end. It would just continue to run through the days of the week infinitely until ideally you unlock all the content. You gain
mm-hmm.
all the levels, you see all the things, um, which is kind of like you're going around a roundabout constantly, and every now and again you'll stop and look at the scenery and then come back to the roundabout instead of just like running down a road constantly until you get to the end and stop. Um, and so being able to look at different ways of building out the formula and looking at how different things can be done is only a positive, right? Like this, the way that it's built in the code might be something as a precursor to work as a sex scene later, like comes together in a more interactive way for you or something like that, which could be kind of cool because we've definitely done that kind of stuff as well. So I don't know. I just thought it was like a really strange tone shift. I'm curious to see what that maybe means for the future. As expected, I'm probably going to be waiting a few months and then coming back and then getting whatever the version is at the time. Because I'm a free member at the moment. Cyan is literally the only active subscription I have on the THM Patreon, um, which I guess is telling. I don't normally jump on and check stuff out. Um, but this one, I was like, wow, it's like so far behind on the public version than on the Patreon version. Most people are like 1 month is like the thing. Like you get 1 month early if you're on
Yeah.
Patreon. This one is like heaps more. It's like 4 versions in
I mean, there's
front.
got to be something said for the power of furry artist money.
True.
Like it's furries are very dedicated, and they also, I think, because the furry fandom is so centered around artists, there's a lot more respect for the effort that goes into art because so many furries like they
Mm.
have personas. They had to commission someone to get their persona like reference sheet, and they commission people regularly to get new art. And so I find a lot of furries I talk to have a lot more respect. They're like, I've seen people do like reference sheets for multiple hundreds of dollars, and if it's a really nice artist who's like developed a brand, and it's kind of like getting a Gucci purse at that point, where it's like,
Mm.
okay, part of it is you're paying to get your character drawn by this artist. And people understand that and are kind of okay with that because it's like, well, if you don't want the Gucci purse, then go find someone else who's, giving a
Go
$50
get a
reference sheet.
Velcro wallet like the rest of us.
um, and I mean, I imagine that's probably given him some leeway that maybe other devs can't get. Because you
Mm.
certainly, like I said, I looked at the itch.io comments, and there were still definitely some people who were like, this game doesn't update enough. You take too long. He's just scamming people to get their money. The typical post I think any like Patreon page gets.
Mm.
But it's a lot of work to create one game, and I think he also uploads sketches and things like that to his Patreon,
Yeah, you
and
get to see
he's
the
developed
CG process.
yeah, and he's developed a following over the years, and I think he's developed a lot of goodwill having these nice characters. He's published comics for free, things like that. Having a lot of hype around the Emily character. One of the things, like the first way I was introduced with her was through the Bad Dragon Onahole they made based off of her.
Mm.
So she has like an officially like official Bad Dragon Onahole if you want to fuck her butthole. And I remember like that being the way I was introduced because I saw the art for it. I was like, oh wow, that's a really pretty art style. I wonder who drew this. It's their OC. And so people evidently really like this character. So it makes sense to me that they're able to sort of take their time with this game. And, the thing about like, people always point at Patreon numbers and they're like, oh, he's making way too much money just to produce, not even an update per month or whatever. I'm like, those people, it's not just that you're paying for the game. A lot of these people are paying because they really like this artist and they want them to be able to pay their rent. Because if they can't pay their rent, guess what? The game is going to be even slower.
Yeah, the game ceases to exist at that point. That's something
Yeah.
that I worry about as well, right? Because we've got multiple projects and multiple artists, but also I have to be able to do all of the stuff that I do on top. Because with My Peak Princess, I'm not sure if Cyan does music or finds it somewhere else, but I'm assuming that everything else, which is coding, illustrating, writing dialogue, doing narrative direction, which is like, okay, what's the next scene going to be? How is this going to look? What's this going to come together? Does this fit into our deadline? How long is this going to take? How many hours do I need to spend on these different things? Am I going to spend this time on a background or am I going to spend this time on character design? Can I reuse a background? It goes on. But then also publishing, marketing, and all these other things that go into the actual business side of it, where it's just one person running the whole thing. And then you go, oh, you don't deserve, the money to live on for one person. And it's like, but I'm doing 10 people's jobs.
Yeah.
Surely getting paid for 10 people's jobs is not unrealistic, right? Like for us, we've got several artists that work for us, and yet I'm still doing 5 or 6 people's jobs. And I'm getting paid less than one person because most of the money that comes in for our Patreon pays for the artists on their commission rate for them to go and make the art. And so I think a lot of these weird complaints is just people don't value art. People think art's kind of a hobby or a joke when it's insane that like 99% of the things that make life fun are art.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, I think the other thing that really like makes it worth the money and makes helps me to understand like like it is that attention to detail I talked about earlier. Like there's just so many small details in each of the scenes. Like even the scene with like the chicken, right? And she's teaching you this lesson about basically like how furries came to be in this universe. And like there's a bunch of individual slides that she shows you that have all these little sketches that are describing what it is she's
Mm.
trying to teach you. And like, that's something that they could have just chosen to describe only via text or maybe have one single image of her explaining things, but there's like 4 or 5. And it's like he has to take time to design all of those and figure out, okay, what do I want to draw for this and how am I going to make it look good. And there's even like minor details like characters holding items and their sprites, like you give her like a certain food and like that particular food shows up on screen and all of that stuff has to be drawn by someone. It doesn't just magically appear out of thin air.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of show in this game and not that much to tell. A lot of the actual writing is just dialogue, so there's a lot of just people kind of talking. Um, and then you'll just have like maybe a description of you walking somewhere or going to a new place or describing something that is already on screen to kind of help elaborate onto that. Which I think is kind of interesting. I think it's done really, really well.
Hmm.
I don't have the skills to be able to make something quite like that. I have to deal with juggling multiple artists to make a project come together. Because we've got different character artists and different background artists. Shackles has a character artist and a background artist. We've had the same background artist for the entire game, but we've had different character artists come and go. Sleeve Shock and Cufflinks and Cages have the same different background artists, different from Shackles, and they both for the eagle-eyed viewer they share one office background between the two of them because it's easier to reuse stuff between different games and it's not obvious that it's from a different setting. And then each of those have their own unique character artists which do all the character art. So going and then asking the character artist to do all the background art as well does make it look more seamless, but it adds so much time to the project. We already struggle with getting 2 to 3 pieces out every month from the one artist. Just because some of it is so detailed or so complicated or so time consuming, or shit, they just have a life outside of the job, God forbid. And it makes it
There's
hard.
also some artists that just don't really excel at background art. Like, most animated shows you see, like the background people who do the backgrounds and people who do like the characters are completely different people.
Usually, yeah.
That's usually something that someone specializes in one or the other. So it's very like rare, I think, for an artist to be able to excel at both so well, because it's not just that he does backgrounds kind of good, it's that he does backgrounds amazingly well, and the character art and CGs are also gorgeous. And like I would say that's
consistent.
a very like rare
it's a consistent
skill.
style between them, which I think is very important. Like it's got that really nice soft pastel kind of vibe between all the characters. Like the characters don't feel out of place from the background, and everything fits really nicely.
Also, the cocks look great, I have to say. My favorite thing when I was like in the very first scene where she's giving you a tit job is that one, they draw foreskin on the dicks.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Shout out to my non-American homies.
And it actually moves like when she moves her tits, like actual foreskin would. And I'm like, that's such a good detail.
Yeah. Hell yeah, uncut representation, finally. This is what we've been waiting for. And on that note, watching this podcast, you'll realize nothing is actually cut. All of the editing is done by me. It has nothing really removed for it, except for that one time when we had like 4 minutes of complete silence, which was entirely my fault. And that's been edited for your viewing. But this is the end of this Sexy Business Podcast episode. This is a more specific dive into a particular game, which you might do from time to time. And we also have interviews. We also have discussion topics where we've talked about different marketing strategies. We've talked about how to get your start in VTubing or in game design. All these things I think are really kind of a value add to anyone looking to kind of do what we do and create stuff in this space. So definitely go and check out our back catalog. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button. And if you're new to YouTube, you have to click the bell for the notifications. Otherwise, you're a slave to the algorithm, and all you will see is skibidi toilet videos. You will never actually see content from us. So you have to get engaged, come along, and leave a comment. I want to know if you've played My Pig Princess, if you're a big fan, and if you are a furry or not. Did this convert you? Are you one of us now? And then hopefully we'll see you next time back in this sexy business from us on the Sexy Business Podcast.
Bye-bye.